Grace took a sip of her coffee and leaned in closer to Patricia. I probably shouldn't say this, but she glanced around the church lobby, making sure no one was listening. Have you noticed Pastor James and that new worship leader spending a lot of time together? Patricia's eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, I saw them having coffee, alone, twice last week, and his wife wasn't there. That doesn't necessarily mean... I'm just saying it looks suspicious. And where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Patricia nodded slowly, concern creasing her face. Should we tell someone? Oh, I don't know. I don't want to spread rumors. But maybe we should pray about it. Keep an eye on things. Grace said it with such concern, such spiritual-sounding language, that it almost seemed righteous. But as Patricia walked away, already composing a text to her prayer group about the situation with Pastor James, Grace felt that familiar buzz. The buzz of being the one who knew something, the one people came to for information, the one at the center of every conversation. She told herself she was just being vigilant, just caring about her church. But deep down, in a place she didn't like to examine, she knew the truth. She loved this, the power of it, the attention, the way people leaned in when she spoke. Gossip had become her drug, and she was addicted. Grace hadn't always been this way. 5 years ago, she'd moved to town knowing no one. New job, new church, new life. She'd felt invisible, irrelevant. Then one day, at a church potluck, she'd overheard 2 women talking about the youth pastor's sudden resignation. Grace had happened to know why. She'd seen him arguing with the senior pastor in the parking lot the week before. When the women noticed her, one had asked, "Do you know what happened?" And Grace, hungry for connection, had shared what she'd witnessed. The women had been fascinated, had pulled her into their conversation, had asked follow-up questions, had treated her like she mattered. It felt good, really good. So when another opportunity came to share information, this time about a marriage struggling in the congregation, Grace had shared that too, framed as prayer requests, of course. Then another, and another. Before long, Grace had become the information hub of the church. If you wanted to know what was really going on, you talked to Grace. She told herself she was building community, creating connections, helping people stay informed so they could pray effectively. But really, she was feeding an addiction to relevance. Grace's phone was always buzzing. Group texts, direct messages, coffee invitations from people who wanted to catch up, but really wanted information. She knew everything about everyone, who was struggling financially, who was having marriage problems, who was dealing with rebellious kids, who was secretly looking for a new church, who had been passed over for a ministry position and was bitter about it. And she shared it all, always with a veneer of concern, always prefaced with, "I'm only telling you this so you can pray," or "I probably shouldn't say this, but..." Her closest friends, if you could call them that, were other women who loved gossip as much as she did. They'd meet for coffee and call it fellowship, but really, it was information exchange. Grace's husband, Tom, had tried to talk to her about it. "Honey, I don't think you should be sharing what you heard about the Mitchell's marriage. I'm not gossiping. I'm asking for prayer. There's a difference between asking for prayer and spreading private information. I'm just trying to keep our community connected." By violating people's privacy, Grace had bristled. "You don't understand. Women need to talk. We need to process things together. Processing is one thing. What you're doing is something else." But Grace had dismissed his concerns. Tom worked long hours. He didn't understand church dynamics, didn't understand how important it was to stay connected, to be in the know. Then came the new assistant pastor's wife, Rachel. Rachel was young, beautiful, educated. She had a thriving career, a seemingly perfect marriage, and a warmth that drew people in immediately. Grace had felt threatened from day one. People who used to come to Grace for information started spending time with Rachel instead. The women's ministry leader, who'd always relied on Grace, started asking Rachel to help with events. Grace watched her influence slowly eroding, and she didn't like it. So when she noticed Rachel leaving church early one Sunday, looking upset, Grace's mind started spinning. The next day at coffee with Patricia, Grace mentioned it casually. "Did you see Rachel bolt out of church yesterday? She looked really shaken. I hope everything's okay with her and Pastor David." "What do you mean?" "Oh, nothing specific. Just, you know how it is being a pastor's wife. So much pressure. I just hope they're doing okay." It was vague enough to be deniable, but specific enough to plant a seed. Patricia, ever eager for information, asked around. Within a week, the rumor had transformed. Rachel had left because she was upset with her husband. They were having problems. Someone had seen them arguing. None of it was true, but Grace had struck the match, and the fire was spreading. 3 weeks later, Grace's phone rang. Pastor David's number. Her stomach dropped. "Grace, do you have a few minutes? I'd like to meet with you and Tom this afternoon." She knew immediately what it was about. They sat in Pastor David's office, Rachel beside him. Both looked exhausted. "Grace, I need to ask you something directly," Pastor David began. "Have you been spreading rumors about Rachel and me?" Grace's mouth went dry. I don't know what you mean." "Multiple people have come to us with concerns about our marriage, all of them traced back to you as the original source. I never said anything specific. You implied things. You planted seeds. You created doubt where there was none." His voice was controlled but pained. "Do you have any idea what the past 3 weeks have been like for us?" Rachel spoke up, tears in her eyes. "I've had women coming up to me asking if I'm okay, if I need to talk, if there are problems in my marriage. I couldn't figure out why until someone finally told me what you'd been saying." "I was concerned." "You weren't concerned," Rachel's voice cracked. "You were threatened, and instead of dealing with your own insecurity, you tried to tear me down with whispers and insinuations." The words hit Grace like a slap. "The truth is," Pastor David continued, "Rachel left church early that Sunday because she'd just gotten news that her mother was diagnosed with cancer. She was devastated, and instead of reaching out with compassion, you turned her pain into gossip." Grace felt sick. "Grace," Pastor David's voice was firm, "gossip isn't just unkind, it's sin. It destroys lives, reputations, relationships, entire communities, and you've been weaponizing it for years. I never meant to hurt anyone, but you did. You've hurt Rachel. You've hurt me. And honestly, looking at our records, you've hurt dozens of people in this church with your rumors and half-truths." Tom, who'd been silent, finally spoke. "She knows, and she's going to stop." "It's not that simple," Pastor David said gently. "This is a pattern, not a one-time mistake. And Grace, if you don't address this, truly address it, you're going to have to step back from leadership. We can't have someone in a position of influence who's actively harming the community." Grace wanted to defend herself, wanted to minimize it, wanted to shift blame. But sitting there, seeing the pain in Rachel's eyes, hearing the disappointment in Pastor David's voice, feeling Tom's hand gripping hers with desperation, she couldn't. Because for the first time, she saw her gossip for what it really was. Not connection, destruction. Not community building, community breaking. Not harmless chatter, poison. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She lay in bed replaying every conversation, every prayer request, every whispered insinuation. How many people had she hurt? How many reputations had she damaged? How many relationships had she poisoned? She got up and opened her Bible, something she'd been neglecting for months, too busy with her phone and her gossip networks. The pages fell open to James 3:5-6. "Likewise, The tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Grace read the words again and again. The tongue is a fire. She thought about all the fires she'd started, all the damage she'd done with just words. She kept reading. Proverbs 16:28. A perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. Proverbs 26:20. Without wood, a fire goes out. Without a gossip, a quarrel dies down. Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Every verse felt like a mirror held up to her soul, and she hated what she saw. Grace fell to her knees beside her bed and wept. God, I've been so blind. I've been destroying people with my words. I told myself I was helping, but I was just feeding my own ego, making myself feel important by tearing others down. Forgive me. Please forgive me. The sobs came harder. I don't even know how to fix this. How do I undo all the damage? How do I take back words that have already spread? She prayed until exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep. The next morning, Grace did something terrifying. She made a list of everyone she could remember gossiping about, every person she'd whispered about, every reputation she'd damaged, every rumor she'd spread or amplified. The list was 3 pages long. She stared at it, overwhelmed. I can't apologize to all these people. Some of them don't even know what I said. Tom looked over her shoulder. Then you start with the ones who do know. Rachel, the others you hurt directly, and you commit to never doing it again. What if they don't forgive me? Then you live with that consequence, but you try anyway. Rachel's number sat in Grace's phone, her thumb hovering over the call button. Finally, she pressed it. Hello? Rachel's voice was cautious. Rachel, it's Grace. I need to apologize. Really apologize. Not minimize or excuse, just say I'm sorry. Silence. I was jealous of you, threatened by you, and instead of dealing with my own insecurity, I tried to tear you down with gossip and insinuation. What I did was cruel. It was sin, and I'm so sorry. More silence. Then, thank you for saying that. I know sorry doesn't undo the damage, but I want you to know I'm getting help. I'm working on this, and I'm never going to spread rumors again. Rachel's voice was soft. Grace, gossip is such a common sin that people don't take it seriously, but it's destroyed so many lives, so many churches. I'm glad you're finally seeing it for what it is. Will you forgive me? A long pause. I'm working on it. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. That's fair. That's more than fair. After they hung up, Grace sat in silence. One apology down, dozens more to go. 3 months later, Grace had stepped down from all leadership positions. At first, it felt like punishment, like humiliation, but her counselor, Dr. Martinez, helped her reframe it. You're not being punished. You're being protected. God is removing you from situations where you could hurt others or yourself while you heal. Grace had started meeting with Dr. Martinez weekly, unpacking why gossip had become her drug. You were looking for significance, Dr. Martinez explained. When you moved here and felt invisible, gossip gave you instant relevance. It made you feel important, connected, powerful. But that's a false significance that requires constant feeding. So what do I do instead? You learn to find your significance in God. You learn that you matter because He says you matter, not because you're at the center of information networks. It was hard work, uncomfortable work, Grace had to sit with the feeling of being irrelevant, had to let conversations happen without her, had to watch information circulate without being the source. It felt like withdrawal, because it was. She'd also had to make amends. Some people had accepted her apologies graciously, others had been coldly polite. A few had told her, bluntly, that she'd caused irreparable damage. Each conversation was painful but necessary. 6 months into her journey, Grace was at the grocery store when she overheard two women from church talking. "Did you hear about Janet's daughter?" Grace's ears perked up automatically. Old instincts. She knew what they were talking about. Janet's teenage daughter had gotten in trouble at school. Grace had heard about it through the parent network. The old Grace would have inserted herself into the conversation, would have added details, would have speculated about what it meant. The new Grace felt the pull, felt the familiar craving, but she kept walking, past the women, past the opportunity, past the temptation. Her heart pounded, her hands shook slightly, but she kept walking. In the parking lot, she sat in her car and called her accountability partner, Susan, a woman from church who'd agreed to walk through this with her. "I almost did it," Grace admitted. "I almost jumped into a gossip conversation." "But you didn't." "No, but I wanted to. God, Susan, I still want to." "That's normal. The craving doesn't disappear overnight. But you're building new patterns. You're choosing differently. That's what matters." Grace took a shaky breath. "When does it get easier?" "Eventually. But Grace, you spent 5 years building this habit. It's going to take time to break it." 1 year later, Grace stood before the women's ministry, hands trembling as she held the microphone. Pastor David had asked if she'd be willing to share her testimony. She'd almost said no, but Rachel, who'd become an unexpected friend over the past year, had encouraged her. "Your story could help people, could wake them up before they do the damage you did." So here she was. "My name is Grace, and I destroyed lives with my tongue." The room was silent. For 5 years, I was a gossip. I told myself I was building community, creating connection, helping people pray for each other. But really, I was feeding my ego, making myself feel important by tearing others down. She paused, collecting herself. I damaged reputations, spread lies, turned private pain into public speculation. And I did it all while calling myself a faithful church member. Some women shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded, recognizing themselves. James 3 says the tongue is a fire, and I set so many fires in this community. Fires that hurt real people, that destroyed trust, that drove some people away from church entirely. Her voice cracked. "I'm not sharing this to shame anyone else. I'm sharing it because gossip is so normalized in Christian culture that we don't see it as sin anymore. We call it venting, or sharing prayer requests, or just being honest. But if we're sharing information that isn't ours to share, if we're damaging someone's reputation, if we're speaking when we should be silent, it's gossip, and it's sin." She looked out at the faces before her. "If you're a gossip like I was, I'm begging you, stop before you destroy something you can't rebuild. Stop before you hurt someone beyond repair. Stop before you have to spend a year apologizing and still not undo all the damage." A woman in the third row was crying silently. "It's not too late," Grace continued. "God's grace is sufficient. His forgiveness is real, but you have to stop. You have to turn away from it. You have to let God fill the void you're trying to fill with other people's business." After the service, 3 women approached Grace. "Thank you for sharing that. I needed to hear it. I've been doing the same thing. I didn't realize. Can we talk sometime? I think I need help with this." Grace hugged each of them, tears in her eyes. Maybe some good could come from her brokenness after all. Grace sat in Rachel's living room, having coffee, real fellowship this time, not gossip disguised as connection. "Can I tell you something?" Rachel said. "Of course. When you first apologized to me, I didn't think I could ever forgive you. The damage you'd done felt too big." Grace nodded, pain in her eyes. "I understand. But watching you this past year, the way you fought to change, the way you've humbled yourself, the way you've made amends even when it was uncomfortable, I've seen genuine repentance, and that's made forgiveness possible." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "We're not going to be best friends overnight," Rachel continued gently. "Trust takes time to rebuild. But I consider you a sister now. A forgiven sister." Grace wept with gratitude. "And Grace, I'm proud of you. I know that doesn't erase what happened, but I want you to know, I see the change. God's done something real in you." That evening, Grace sat on her porch with her journal, a practice Dr. Martinez had recommended. She wrote, "A year ago, I was addicted to gossip. I told myself I was building community, but I was building a kingdom with myself at the center. I made myself significant by making others small. I filled my emptiness with other people's private pain. Today, I'm learning what real community looks like, what real significance is, what it means to use my words to build up instead of a tear down. I still mess up. I still feel the pull toward gossip sometimes, but God is teaching me that my worth doesn't come from being at the center of information. It comes from being His daughter." Proverbs 10:19 says, "Sin is not ended by multiplying words, but the prudent hold their tongues." I'm learning to be prudent, to be silent, to hold my tongue even when everything in me wants to speak. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most freeing, because a life built on gossip is a life built on sand. But a life built on God's truth, on speaking life instead of death, on blessing instead of cursing, that's a life that lasts. I'm not there yet, but I'm on the way. Grace closed her journal and looked at the sunset painting, the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day was ending, and Grace, truly finally, was learning what it meant to use her words for good, to speak life, not death, to build up, not tear down, to be known for grace, not gossip. It was a long road, but it was the right one, and that made all the difference.